House will come to order. The Pledge of Allegiance this morning will be led by Ishani Singh and Bo Garfunkel from the Challenge School in Denver.
Please join us for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Cole, please take the roll.
Representatives Becker, Buck, Buckner, Conti, quorum excused, Court, Representative Court, absent, Del Grosso, Representative Court is present, Representative Del Grosso, Del Grosso, Dorr is present. Duran is
Absent.
absent. Everett, Exum, Fields, Fisher, Foote, Garcia, Representative Duran's present. Gardner, Giroux, Janal, Hamner, Holbert, Hollinghorst, Humphrey, Joshi, Kagan, Representative Kagan, absent. Kraftharp,
He's not here right now.
Labuda, Landgraf, Lawrence, Lepsock, Lee, Representative Kagan is present. May, McCann, McLaughlin, McNulty, Melton, Mitch Bush, Moreno, Murray, Navarro, Nordberg, Pabon, Peniston, Pedersen, Primavera, Priola, Rankin, Rosenthal, Ryden, Sane, Salazar, Schaefer excused, Scott excused, Singer, Sonnenberg excused, Stevens excused, Swam excused, Zabo, Tyler, Vigil, Waller, Williams, Wilson, Wright, Young, Speaker Farinina.
And she texted me this morning and said, yes, Spencer, you know, maybe they'll put him in jail. Like,
What are we at? 59 and 6. Is Representative Rosenthal going to do the journal? Rosenthal! You doing the journal? Someone do the journal. Hey, Moreno. Moreno. Can you do the journal? Oh, yeah. With 59 members present, 6 excused, a quorum is present. Representative Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House approve the reading of the Journal from February 28th, 2014.
As corrected by the Chief Clerk.
As corrected by the Chief Clerk.
You've heard the motion that was supposed to be made by Representative Rosenthal under my notes. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Announcements and introductions. Representative McNulty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask that I be excused at 11:30 today.
Representative McNulty will be excused as requested as much as he'd like to be. De nada. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, today we have the Denver Links Incorporated Public Affairs Committee, and they are visiting here with the Hallett Fundamental Academy. I have two groups of 25 fourth graders here. If you would please welcome them. They're sitting on the side here. Welcome.
Representative Williams, you didn't invite introduce our school board member, who I'll introduce. We have with us Denver School Board member Happy Haynes. Representative Hamner with a great hat on.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And with so many kids on the floor today, I am happy to announce to you a proclamation from Governor Hickenlooper. Whereas the Colorado Reads Initiative was launched to ensure every child can succeed, whereas when it comes to literacy, our state is taking the lead, whereas Dr. Seuss's stories are enjoyed by people of all ages, whereas fantastic discoveries can be made within a book's pages, whereas reading is great, exciting, and fun, whereas reading is a skill important to everyone. Whereas books are superb to read or to hear, whereas books are loyal companions year after year, whereas a good book can be enjoyed in the sun, snow, or rain. Therefore, I, John W. Hickenlooper, Governor of the State of Colorado, do hereby proclaim, in a Dr. Seussical way, March 3rd, 2014, Read Across America Day.
Thank you, Representative Hamner. And to make news, I don't like green eggs and ham, Sam I am. I do not like them, Sam I am. I just read that to my daughter last night. Representative Peniston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as
you're not wearing orange, what's wrong?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I have proclaimed before, I am the privileged owner of this elegant green jacket, the house green jacket. Now, separate from the sergeant's green jackets, not to be confused. And 2 weeks from today, I will be awarding, because I am leaving this body this year, it is my responsibility and privilege to award this gorgeous, elegant jacket to one of my colleagues on the opposite side of the aisle. Now, I need to make sure that you all know the history of this. I will be somewhat brief, but this is very important House business, Mr. Speaker. 'Tis said the green coat was crafted by the leprechauns and given to St. Patty himself to wear as he taught at many schools along Ireland's west coast. After nearly 30 years of teaching and spreading God's word, he died on March 17th, 461 AD. He was to be buried in the green coat, St. Patty himself. However, a mortician switched it with a British knockoff and kept the real coat for his own evil purposes. When the leprechauns discovered this great crime, they sought the help of the Fenians, also known as Fianna, a legendary band, and I believe this was written, colleagues, by former Representative and Minority Leader May, so a lot of history in here. The Fenians immediately recovered the coat from the evil mortician and returned it to the leprechauns. At the following great council, the leprechauns determined that, in honor of both St. Patty and the Fenians, the coat shall only be worn by those who seek the truth and strive to preserve justice through the making of law. Not much is known of the history of the coat from 461 AD to modern times, although it is said that Washington wore the coat for warmth and wisdom as he crossed the Delaware, and that Lincoln did the same on his train ride to Gettysburg. What is known, however, is that sometime in the late 20th century, the coat was acquired by Representative Stan Johnson, Republican of Boulder, Colorado, in an honest game of poker with a few leprechauns at the Irish pub near the Colorado State Capitol, though it is said some advantage was taken because the leprechauns had a pint or three too many. The coat was transformed with some conditions, however. First, that it shall never leave the Capitol.
On one, Zach, Representative Peniston. Thank you, members. I know this is not the most serious thing, but this is our House tradition, so it'd be nice if you could pay attention.
So the coat is to be transferred with some conditions. First, that it shall never leave the Capitol. I've been faithful to that. Second, its great powers shall not be used for partisan advantage, and therefore the requirement that when the holder's time of public service is done, it should be bequeathed to a worthy member of the other party. Now, just to give you an idea of all these worthy members, it started with Representative Stan Johnson, Republican of Boulder. It went to Representative Jim Dyer, Democrat of Durango. Then it went to Representative Gail Berry, Republican of Grand Junction. And then on to Representative Alice Madden, Democrat of Boulder. Then to Representative Ellen Roberts, Republican of Durango. And then Representative Ann McGeehan, Democrat Denver, and Representative Mike May of Parker, Republican of Parker, got it in a one-week timeshare arrangement. But Representative McGeehan left the body, so it became Representative May's full responsibility. Then it was given to Representative Karen Middleton, Democrat of Aurora, on to Representative Laura Bradford, Republican of Colbrand, and then through Representative Bradford, it came to me, Representative Sherilyn Peniston. So it's my responsibility now to pass it on. And I'm going to do it a little bit differently. It's kind of been done on a suck-up basis. And because we as politicians have to suck up so much, and it's getting to be campaign season, we'll be doing it so much more, I want to relieve my esteemed colleagues on this side of the aisle of that requirement. And so I thought long and hard about, you know, how I would do this and who was most worthy. And frankly, I find a bit of worthiness in every single one of you as I have worked with you over the past couple years and some of you longer. So you all have a certain worthiness. And then I looked on the opposite side, and quite frankly, you've all ticked me off at one time or another. So I was kind of left with a dilemma. So I'm going to make this a game of chance for my turn this year. I have a bowl here that has green and white chocolate balls, and there are many, many of them. And so you can participate by guessing the number of green balls. I will leave it on my desk. You can peruse it any way you want to. Now, I have arranged with the sergeants to have someone here at night, 24 hours, so that no one can cheat and come in at night and count all of these. So you don't plan on that. But you should all come by my desk at some point and give me a number that you think represents, and then you will get this green jacket, and all of the green and white chocolate balls will be your reward. So thank you.
Representative Giroux for the sucking up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, I've tried to suck up and it doesn't work. I don't know. I think it could be my personality. And Representative Peniston, did I hear Andy, Senator Kerr's name should have been on that list, and also Representative Roberts' name should be on that list. And if you could also make a copy of that, and or if you could hand it to the chief clerk, she'd like to make a copy of that so that we have that record. And members, I think what we need, excuse me, the diameter of the sphere minus the distance down the sphere by the circumference by the diameter of the spheres within. And yeah, there we go. It's there.
Representative Peniston.
Thank you, Representative Giroux. I did mention Representative Roberts, but I do have to go back and find. Yes, Representative Kerr should be on here somewhere. I need to go back and look at that. Thank you.
Representative McNulty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Peniston, you know, I've accomplished a great deal down here and have enjoyed my time, passed lots of good bills, had the chance to kill some bad bills. The one thing that I lament that I will not have accomplished during my time here is ever wearing the green jacket, especially after it was dry cleaned. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, any further? Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Peniston, before you get too far away, our little leprechaun is actually celebrating her birthday today on Read Across America Day. So I need to call up the Capitol Choir And I see we have a lot of children on the floor today, and I bet it would sound lovely if all of our children would join the Capitol Choir in wishing Representative Peniston a fabulous birthday today. Are we ready? Ready. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Representative Peniston. Happy birthday to you.
Any further announcements or introductions? Seeing none, we will proceed to our next order of business, third reading of bills, final passage. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to Senate Bill 39.
Senate Bill 39 by Senator Balmer also represents McCann Court concerning grant of limited authority to emergency medical service providers to voluntarily provide pre-veterinary emergency care to certain domesticated animals.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 39 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 39 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Navarro, Pedersen, Szabo. Close the machine. With 59 aye votes, 0 no votes, 6 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 39 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1171.
House Bill 1171, Representative McNulty, also Senator Roberts, concerning rules on forensic medical evidence in sexual assault cases.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1171 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question before the House is the passage of House Bill 1171 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 59 aye votes, 0 no votes, 6 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1171 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to Senate Bill 48.
Senate Bill 48 by Senator Guzman, also Representative Wallach, concerning use of the most recent United States Census Bureau mortality table as evidence of the expectancy of continued life of any person in civil action in Colorado.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 48 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 48. Members, Mr. Kohler, please open the machine. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote against Representative Waller's bill. Not that I can say that right, so even though I vote for it. Representative Del Grosso, Lee, and Mitch Bush. Close the machine. With 59 aye votes, 0 no votes, 6 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 48 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1002.
House Bill 1002, Representative Young, also Senator Jones, concerning establishment of a grant program under the Colorado Water Quality Control Act to repair water infrastructure impacted by a natural disaster in connection with making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1002 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1002 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives, close the machine. With 51 aye votes, 8 no votes, 6 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1002 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1003.
House Bill 1003, Representatives Nordberg and Sane, also Senator Kafalas, concerning exemption from state income tax of income that is earned by a non-resident individual working temporarily in state to assist with disaster emergency relief activities in connection with making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1003 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1003 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Fields and Gardner, close the machine. With 59 aye votes, 0 no votes, 6 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1003 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1006.
House Bill 1006, Representative Singer, also Senator Lundberg, concerning the remittance of the marketing and promotion tax collected by lodging establishments in the local marketing district in connection with making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1006 on third reading and final passage.
Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Excuse me. I just want to again thank Representative Singer for allowing the amendment to go on the bill. I'll be a yes vote. So all of you that don't, you can be your no's, but I'll be a yes vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1006 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Dorr, Gardner, and Nordberg, close the machine. With 56 aye votes, 3 no votes, 6 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1006 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1293.
House Bill 1293, Representative Hollinghorse, also Senator Heath, concerning payment of expenses of the Legislative Department.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1293 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1293 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote on our budget. Representatives Exum, Lee, Gardner, McNulty, Young, and Szabo. Close the machine. With 57 aye votes, 2 no votes, who don't want any aides, 6 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1293 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. We will proceed to our next order of business, second reading of bills, general orders. Representative Primavera. You've heard the motion. Seeing no objection, the House resolves itself to committee of the whole for consideration of general orders. Representative Primavera will take the chair.
The committee will come to order. With your unanimous consent, the bills will be read by title unless there is a request for reading of a bill at length. Committee amendments will not be read unless requested, as they are printed and in your bill folders. Floor amendments will be shown on the screen and on your iPads and not read unless requested. Bills will be laid over upon motion of the Majority Leader, and the coat rule is relaxed. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to lay over House Bill 1042, House Bill 1253, and House Bill 1186 to the end of the calendar.
Are there any objections? Seeing none, the list of bills will be laid over as requested by the Majority Leader. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1182.
House Bill 1182, Representative Hamner, concerning changes to public education accountability for the 2015-16 school year to accommodate the transition to administering new statewide assessments.
Representative Hamner. Representative Hamner, House Bill 1182. There is an education. Representative Hamner.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. I move House Bill 1182 and the Education Committee report.
To the Education Committee report, Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize for being in a discussion on another bill when my bill was called. In the Education Committee, we amended the title to more accurately fit what the bill was trying to accomplish. So I ask for your support of the Education Committee report.
Is there any further discussion on the Education Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the Education Committee report. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The committee report passes. To the bill, Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, House Bill 1182 is necessary to revise statute in order to address our accountability system as it relates to our changing student assessment system. The bill did pass unanimously in the Education Committee, and I ask for your support of House Bill 1182.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1182? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1182. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. House Bill 1182 passes. Which one's next? Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1256.
House Bill 1256, Representative Fisher, also Senator Kerr, concerning authorizing institutions of higher education to enter into employment contracts for librarians.
Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House Bill 1256, and there is no committee report.
To the bill, Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, this is a very simple little modification to a bill that I ran 2 years ago, House Bill 1244, which simply adds librarians to the list of people who are authorized but not required by institutions of higher education to be offered multi-year contracts, and ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative Fisher. Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1256? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1256. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. House Bill 1256 is adopted. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 83.
Senate Bill 83 by Senator Crowder, also Representative Ferrandino, concerning reimbursement to be paid by a county to the state for costs incurred by the state in connection with the reappraisal of property in the county.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to lay over House Bill or Senate Bill 83, one bill.
Is there any objection to laying over House Bill 83, one bill? Seeing none, House Bill 83 will be laid over. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1206.
House Bill 1206, Representative Conti, concerning modifications to the Colorado Charitable Solicitations Act in connection with prohibiting certain charitable solicitation practices, modifying the Secretary of State's finding authority, adjusting registration statement requirements, and specifying requirements for appointing registered agents.
Representative Conti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House Bill 1206 in the committee report.
To the committee report, Representative Conti, at the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee report, correct?
Correct, Madam Chair. In the committee report, we struck on page 2, line 16, we struck persons and substituted paid solicitor, was a conceptual amendment that was offered in the committee, and we did the same on page 2, line 17, again changing person to paid solicitor so that there was absolute clarity on the party that we were referring to.
Is there any further discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee report. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The committee report is adopted. To the bill, Representative Conti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, this bill is just a simple tightening up of some language, holding a little bit more accountability within the world of for-profit organizations that are contracted by nonprofit organizations. For those of you who may have gone to the child trafficking night that we had, where they talked about the avenues, and it was an education on child trafficking. One of the things that was learned was that some of these paid solicitors, and especially the magazine solicitors, are one of the for-profit industries that are used in the child trafficking networks. And this would seek to tighten up some of the language to hold those and have us know a little bit more information about those paid for-profit people that are being contracted by our nonprofit organizations.
Thank you, Representative Conti. Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1206? Seeing none, the question before us is Representative Conti.
And Madam Chair, thank you. I do have also an amendment that was brought to me by the Secretary of State.
Thank you, Representative Conti. We'll display the amendment.
I would ask that L001 be, I would move it and ask that it be displayed on the screen.
Thank you, Representative Conti. Amendment L001 is properly displayed. To the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Under current law, the information filed with the Secretary of State's office by a charitable organization or a professional fundraising consultant or paid solicitor in connection with the person or organization's registration is public record. The law excludes from public record the residential address and telephone numbers of the individual. L001 would exclude from the public record account numbers of banks and other financial information. So again, it's to continue to help shield people from identity theft and preclude some of that other pertinent financial information from going into the public record.
Thank you, Representative Conti. Is there any further discussion on L001? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L001. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Amendment L001 is adopted. Representative Conti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, this is a good bill that gives greater transparency and accountability, and I would ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1206? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1206. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. House Bill 1206 is adopted. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 83.
Senate Bill 83 by Senator Crowd, also Representative Ferrandino, concerning reimbursement to be paid by county to the state for costs incurred by the state in connection with the reappraisal of property in the county.
Speaker Ferrandino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Senate Bill 83 and ask for an aye vote.
Senate Bill 83 has been moved. Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 83? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of Senate Bill 83. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. Well, that's close, but Senate Bill 83 passes. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to lay over House Bill 1216 until the end of the calendar.
The motion is to lay over House Bill 1216. Is there any objection to laying over House Bill 1216? Seeing none, House Bill 1216 is laid over to the end of the calendar. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1017.
House Bill 1017 by Representative Duran, all starring Ulibarri, concerning measures to expand the availability of affordable housing in the state in connection with making modifications to statutory provisions establishing the Housing Investment Trust Fund, the Housing Development Grant Fund, and the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House Bill 1017, the Appropriations Committee report, the Finance Committee report, and the Local Government Committee report.
Thank you, Representative Duran. To the Appropriations Committee report.
Okay. This was an amendment that was added just to make sure there's annual maintenance and support and our ability for the Department of Revenue to update their tax systems. I ask for your support.
Is there any further discussion on the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The Appropriations Committee report is adopted. To the Finance Committee report, Representative Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment gives a priority for the funds to go to victims of natural disasters. We had a lot of testimony in the 2 committee hearings about the need to really address affordable housing for flood victims in particular, and so we put a priority in the bill with regards to that topic. We also added a amendment that makes make sure there's accountability with the program and a written report to the General Assembly to make sure that the needs that we originally intended with this bill are being met. I ask for your support.
Thank you, Representative Duran. Is there any further discussion on the Finance Committee report? There is. Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, when we set in the original, I guess it was the local government committee, but then this second committee was the Finance Committee that dealt with this. We had discussions a lot about affordable housing and what it meant for Colorado at this time and this date. And around the discussions was the disasters and those people being affected by the recent disasters, in particular the flooding up north in the northern counties in Colorado, and how much of this money would be used for that. And while the sponsor assured us that money would be used, there was no actually set amount. There was no ability to say 25%, 30%, 40%, 100% of this money would be first prioritized to those people. And I think in this day and age, with what we've been facing over the last few months in Colorado and those people being displaced by floods and victims of Mother Nature's wrath, we owe it to them to make sure that they're getting prioritized when it comes to affordable housing so that they can get housing not only to replace what they've lost in many cases because the insurance, flood insurance wasn't there to cover them, but also they can stay in the areas they're looking to stay, which they can still call home and not be moved out of them. So I'm moving an amendment, L009, which would allocate all of the monies from the trust fund that we're talking about in this particular legislation to be used for those that incurred or were destroyed substantial damages as a result of one or more of the state or federally declared natural disasters. And it is properly displayed, Madam Chair.
Did you move your amendment, Representative Dorr?
Yeah, I moved L009 and asked it to be displayed, and it is, and so now I ask that you
Thank you. Okay, Amendment L009 has been moved and is properly displayed on the screen. Representative Duran, did you have your hand up? Representative Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Dorr, I have a couple of questions for you. How did you come to the conclusion that you would like all of the dollars to go to this purpose? One of the things that we've really looked at is trying to assess the need when it comes to affordable housing, in particular for flood victims. And so that's why in the Finance Committee there was an amendment that was added. The amendment that was added in the Finance Committee, just to remind members, is that in making loans of money from the trust fund, the division shall give priority to owners of property that was either destroyed or incurred substantial damage as a result of one or more state or federally declared natural disasters. And so we already have language in the legislation to ensure that there is a priority to those individuals who suffered from the consequences of the flood. So I think in terms of just policy matters, because there are so many other families in addition to the flood victims that would like to be able to receive assistance from this legislation, that it is important that we make it a priority for the flood victims, that they are served first. However, there's other communities in Colorado that could greatly benefit from this bill as well. And so I'm curious as to whether or not you received an assessment of the need, if you had any dollar estimates as to how you came up with this, how much you anticipate is needed to go to this particular community, or is this just a blanket amendment that's coming forward?
Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Duran, and I appreciate the amendment that was added in the Finance Committee where you prioritize monies. I think we owe it to the citizens, especially those that lost so much in these tragedies, that we do more than just say we're going to give you some lip service and prioritize, but actually set down some priority amount. And if we do anything less, I think it's disingenuous for us doing what we do down here in service. Now, while I also understand your question, how did we come up with the number of 100%? Because that's a good starting point, and we can work our way to then. And wanting to be one to compromise and be realistic about it, I would ask as a substitute amendment and move L010 and ask that it be properly displayed.
Thank you, Representative Dorr. Substitute amendment L010 has been moved and is properly displayed to the substitute amendment, Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Substitute amendment is simple. We're not going to say 100% because I think you can have argument around what 100% does when you talk about the monies being allocated in addition to what's already there for the housing fund. This is 50%. And hopefully we never have to get to a point where we have to have this conversation again about the destructions that happened and the people that lost homes and the tragedies that occurred. But for the people that we're handling today, using 50% of that monies, and when I was lobbied on this bill over and over again, I guess about a month ago, they talked about the assistance that it would give to flood victims. And I absolutely agree we need to do that. And we're going to not only set a priority in language, we're going to set a priority in actual statute and say 50% of this monies will be allocated to those that have destroyed or incurred substantial damage as a result of the state or federally declared natural disasters. And I ask for a yes vote.
Thank you, Representative Del Grosso, or Mr. Minority Leader Del Grosso.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, you know, I want to applaud Representative Dorr on this amendment. This is what compromise looks like. You know, he had an amendment that was 100%, heard that, you know, maybe that was a little too much, and then he's willing to come down on that number. And as he stated, that we have heard several comments as this bill was moving forward about how this is going to help flood victims or those of a natural disaster. And then this just further enshrines all of the talk we've heard about one of the main purposes of this bill all along. And that so just further codifies that this is supposed to go to help those that are in need and those that have been you know, harmed by natural disasters. And Representative Duran put it best when she was talking about how the department already prioritizes those that have been affected by this. So if this is already in current statute, there should be no problem at all clarifying what she said is already in statute and clarifying that this money should go to help those that are a part of a natural disaster. And so I look forward to broad bipartisan support in L010.
Thank you, Mr. Minority Leader. Representative Singer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know while we're discussing, that was a Freudian slip, discussing a substitute amendment, there's no substitute for Teddy Hampton and his children at Blue Mountain Elementary School who are witnessing the proceedings here. But more to the point of this amendment, you know, the Flood Disaster Study Committee has convened and met and discussed affordable housing issues. This was brought to the local government committee where Representative Dorr sits, and if an amendment like this were to come forward, I think those would be the times to bring these up. This is not the right time to bring this amendment up, and I would ask for a no vote.
Thank you, Representative Singer. Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Singer, yes, I do sit on local government. Yes, I heard the debate. I talked with the sponsor at that time about the idea I had with this, and she said, let's, you know, talk about it down the road. We're down the road now. And I think when doing the right thing and getting the right piece of legislation passed, it shouldn't matter if it's done in a committee or if it's done on the floor. At the end of the day, you want it to be done in the right way. And so regardless if it was a motion for an amendment at the committee level or a motion for amendment at the floor level, we want the right thing done, and that's what's being done by this amendment coming forward in a substitute manner. I think 50% is the right way to do it, is the right way for us as a legislative body to state we are going to support you, public, especially those citizens in a time of disaster and need when we can. And so I think all of us would agree that getting the right thing done is the right thing to do, regardless of when the right time is.
Representative May.
Did you get all the right thing to do? Thank you, Madam Chair. Here's my question, and this is my concern. If we earmark 50% and it's only for 1 year, if I'm reading this correctly. So what happens when we need 52% or we only go to 49? I don't understand the purpose of earmarking, as long as you would say that it's a priority that we take the flood victims, fire victims first. I'm afraid that when you narrow the gap like that you end up not serving and you do harm rather than good.
Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the reason we want to earmark at least some level of a percentage is so that that money is actually allocated for that particular disaster or disasters. And the hope is you wouldn't have to use all 50%, but you're making sure that the people are made as best as we can in a position to where they're getting affordable housing. And then if you have some left over, my understanding is that would just go roll over into the general what was being used for affordable housing. And I'm open to talking about how we make that better. I want to get to the point to where we aren't just saying we're prioritizing money, but we're actually setting aside some levels of money for the flood victims, for the fire victims, and other natural disaster and tragedies we've had in Colorado. And that's my priority in this. And that's, I think, this process is about getting to that.
Representative May.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My concern is because I've had the privilege or non-privilege, depending on how you want to look at it, on implementing these types of funds. And I'm really concerned that when you put a number to that you end up causing the exact same problem. And it isn't clear in the amendment that it rolls back in, unfortunately. So, I would prefer it if we would just say, we've done lots of things where we earmark and we say this is the first priority, this is the second priority, this is the third priority, but we don't put in statute the exact amount of money, because what would happen is, let me give you an example, is that I had a flood victim come in and they had minor damage, but I had somebody else that really needed it that didn't qualify under this, and you end up picking and choosing not based on what's the right decision, but what's based on a number decision, and that's my concern.
Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have never in the history really of Colorado seen the disaster and the level of disasters that we saw last summer when it came to the floods. We've had previous floods and there's been levels of destruction, but I don't think we can say we've seen the level we've seen today. At least 50% of the housing the housing construction that's going on up in that northern part is due to the flood damage. And so that number is actually not just totally pulled out of the air. What it has done is looking at the studies, looking at the research that's been done, talking to the construction industry and saying how much of this money is going towards, right now, your money, your business is going towards the improvements of houses or reconstruction of houses that were lost. And it's well more than 50% of what they're doing work-wise. And so this number comes up with knowing that half of that money can be used for that, because more than half of that money, frankly, is being used. And to your point about, well, what if we need more? I'm willing to go back to the original amendment says 100%. We start there, and then we go whatever's left over we use then for affordable housing. We can do that. I'm perfectly fine doing that. I wanted to come to a position because Representative Duran said, let's not hamstring the money in a way that's done this, but I said, let's give more than lip service to it, and so 50% became that sort of baseline number that we can work upon.
Representative Del Grosso.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative May, it was this bill sponsor herself that came up and made a statement that this bill was for helping flood victims and those of natural disaster. And we heard all along in testimony when it was in the local government where Representative Singer sits about how this was for flood victims and those of natural disaster. And then we hear that somehow it's inappropriate to bring a amendment on second reading as we're sitting as a body with 65, I guess 59 members today, how that's somehow inappropriate. So maybe Representative Singer would support sending it back to local government, so where he thinks it would be more appropriate to have an amendment added on. But when the sponsor herself talks about how this is for those victims that this amendment specifically talks about, I think that is more than appropriate to bring that up today.
Representative May.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My issue isn't about whether flood victims or fire victims should get the money. My issue is when you as a body when you earmark a certain amount, you limit the departments to make good decisions. And so if you sit there and you said, I wanted it to be, it's already prioritized that the person walking in the door had this criteria, then you're making a decision based on need, not about a number of 50%, 75, or 100%. And the reason why I'm having an issue with it is because I've seen this happen in the past, where we earmark a certain percentage, and it's not about what the need is for the individual. It's about the fact that I now have $25,000 I have to spend because I earmarked it with the percentage, not about a priority of what is actually needed. And so that's my concern.
Representative Becker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I represent a community that was devastated, absolutely devastated by the flood. Jamestown is practically non-existent. And so I think it's very important to get money to flood victims, but I feel like the bill already does that, and that this amendment is politicizing the efforts instead of being genuine in its effort to get money to flood victims. I'm really disappointed that this is being done at the expense of those flood victims. So I would hope that the bill could move forward in its present form, because it's in its present form is the best way we have to help those flood victims. So please, for the flood victims in my community, let's not play politics with this. Let's just move it forward.
Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to address the comments in a couple, sort of break them out. First of all, the question of priority, saying the priority was already given. And I agree, it's in the bill, was an amendment in the Finance Committee. We are not taking out or stripping that level of priority. What we are doing with this amendment is adding more to that priority. We are not just saying we're giving it priority and then whatever number is whatever number. We're saying we're giving it priority and designating 50% of these funds to meet and fit that priority. And when it comes to the flood victims, I heard a comment saying don't do this at the expense of the flood victims. That seems counterintuitive to me, because we're doing this for the flood victims. We aren't doing it in the expense of the flood victims. And by setting this forward, we're saying to the flood victims, yes, we as Colorado, the legislative body, down here at the Capitol, of which you have tasked to give people in the state who are at moments in the worst situations they can be in their life, we're giving you an opportunity to come to the state and designating some money to help you. And by doing that, we aren't doing it at the expense of the flood victims. We are helping the flood victims. We are assuring that that money will be opened up to them so that their houses can be rebuilt and they can stay in their communities. This isn't partisan. This is about all of us coming together to make sure that we prioritize those in the situations that were put in over the summer due to the floods and fires. And I ask for a yes vote.
Thank you, Representative Dorr. Members, I'd like to remind you not to impugn the motives of another member. Representative Duran.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. You know, this is really frustrating to me because, you know, we had a committee hearing in which it was raised in the local government committee that we needed to prioritize the fact that flood victims should be able to benefit from these dollars first. And so as a result of that conversation, I put in language and put an amendment that's in the Finance Committee report that makes sure that the needs of flood victims are prioritized. And then today we come here and there is an amendment that's offered to have 100% of funding, and then the Representative Dorr does a substitute amendment to his own amendment for 50%. And if this is about compromise, I never saw any of these amendments prior to today. And in fact, I think the policy that is best for the flood victims is the policy that is currently in the bill. The policy that is currently in the bill states that flood victims will receive a priority. What if it's more than 50%? What if the need for flood victims is more than 50%? What if in a future year it's less than 50%? by making sure that it is a priority for flood victims, as the language states in the bill, is the best policy to move forward. And if this was about compromise, if this was about working together, I sure would have loved to see these amendments before today, but that didn't happen, unfortunately. And even with that, and everybody's very busy, and I understand that, but what I would ask members to do is support the language as in the bill that gives a priority to flood victims. It will not tie the hands of the state depending on what happens or does not happen in the future. So I ask for a no vote on this amendment, and I'd like to get back to the Finance Committee report.
Representative Court.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with the sponsor. The bill addresses prioritization. I think that this amendment is more limiting, actually. And let's remember, we're talking about long-term policy, not just this year or next year. We're talking long-term policy. The bill already prioritizes as needed. So let's not restrict or limit in any way. Let's let this bill do what this bill is intended to do. Please vote no on the amendment. Thank you.
Representative Dorr. Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to remind members, and most of you, I don't need to remind this, you know very well, first reading, and this bill is a great example of the fact that on first reading, this bill was read across the desk, and it was assigned to, I believe, 2 committees, 3 committees. I think it showed up in local governments, maybe in finance, and it showed up in appropriations. And so it has that hearing for those 3 committees because that's where the Speaker determined that the bill should be assigned. And so there's a certain portion of us that had an opportunity to hear this bill in those 3 committees. Not all of us did, but a certain portion of us did. And then we have second reading, and at second reading, that's when we debate the bill as a committee of the whole. That's what Representative Primavera asked for a couple minutes ago when she asked that we be resolved into the committee of the whole. This bill is to be debated at this level with all of us in the room, and we are debating the bill as we should. That's the rules. Whether or not someone brings or chooses to bring an amendment at second reading should have no real bearing on whether their intent is one thing or another. We all have a lot of bills that we review. We have a lot of bills that are very technical. This is, in my mind, a rather technical bill, and I won't speak to the bill until we get to second reading, but this bill is a part of our process. This bill, House Bill 1017, should be debated on second reading. House Bill 1017 is all about taking care of the issues within the bill itself. If an amendment if we decide to offer an amendment on second reading to House Bill 1017 and a member of this body feels it's an appropriate amendment that would make the bill actually better, they're within their rights to offer that amendment. And in my mind, I would never second guess another member of this body on House Bill 1017 as to whether or not they want to offer an amendment during second reading. To me, that's part of the conversation. That's why we're here. That's why we get paid the big bucks. We're here so that we can debate the merits of House Bill 1017, not so that we can talk about whether one member or another is doing one thing or another. What we're here for is to debate House Bill 1017. Any member that brings an amendment forward for House Bill 1017 that the chair of the body deems appropriate to be heard, that amendment should be heard, and it should not be questioned, nor should it be impugned. I ask for an aye vote on this amendment.
Thank you, Representative Giroux. Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I, too, ask for my aye vote on this amendment. When it comes down to it, this is not about politics. Let's put that aside. This is about flood victims. And let's make sure that we as a state are putting the priorities in place. We've got the language that says priority is for flood victims in the bill right now. Now we're going to actually put some teeth to it and say the priority is there and we are allocating money for it. It can be more than 50%. It's going to be up ultimately to the department to decide, but by putting this money with the percentage on it, we're saying, yes, we want to make sure and assure that that monies will go to the flood victims and those that have been placed in a level of disaster. Believe me, this blood was not, it didn't discriminate between Republicans and Democrats. We don't want to do that with this bill. We want to make sure those monies go to everybody who was a victim of this particular disaster. I ask for a yes vote.
Is there any further discussion on substitute amendment L010? Representative Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regards to your interpretation that it could be above 50%, that's not what the amendment says. What the amendment says is 50% of the monies. It doesn't say up to or beyond. It says 50% of the money. So with that, I would ask for a no vote if we want to do what is right for flood victims, and then the language that's in the bill to prioritize funding for flood victims is sufficient. And if anything, this is going to create problems down the road because you're tying the hands of the state if the needs are above 50%. And in future years, what if hopefully we won't have another disaster like we've seen in Colorado for a very long time. If that happens, you're going to tie the hands of the state at 50% without doing an assessment of need. So I ask for your no vote. I would do what's right for the flood victims and support the language that is in the bill.
Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as you've stated several times, there already is a priority system for talking about how this money is allocated. So if you go above the 50%, then any money that would be left over would roll over into the allocation system, which there you say flood victims would get priority. So there would be nothing that would stop if we had a need that was greater than 50% from stopping that. So if this bill is truly about helping flood victims, there's nothing wrong with actually saying, we're actually going to tie a number to that now, too. We're going to make sure that the dollars being allocated, we're not just paying lip service to those folks and say, geez, in the grand scheme of things, when it goes to some bureaucrat to decide, well, who gets this loan and who doesn't, and they kind of juggle them around and decide where they want it to go, they know that they have to put dollars into actually helping those that have been impacted by a natural disaster. And if that's truly what this bill is about, there is absolutely nothing wrong with putting dollars behind what we're saying this bill is about. I urge an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on substitute amendment L010? The question before us is the adoption of amendment L010. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no? No. Amendment L010 is lost. Back to amendment L009. Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, originally this was the amendment. I created the substitute so that we met some of the concerns that the sponsor had with regards to allocations of 100%. So all this would do is now say 100% of the money would be allocated initially for those that are the victims of the flood disaster and other natural disasters in our state. Monies that were not used for that would flow back over into the affordable housing account and could be used then for affordable housing. This actually, I guess, at the end of the day, should have been the only amendment I ran because the compromise that I put forward was rejected, saying that, well, no, we don't want to go there and hamstring and actually allocate just 50%. Why not 100%? Well, this goes back to that. This is 100%. And if it's not all used, then let's go back and let that money be used for the affordable housing. But this is saying you, victims of flood, regardless of your party affiliation, regardless of who you are going to be prioritized, as is stated in the bill, with the money that is actually designated for this. And I ask for a yes vote on the original amendment. Thank you.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I ask for a no vote. The current language in the bill prioritizes funding for flood victims.
Is there any further discussion on amendment L009? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of amendment L009. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no? Amendment L009 is lost. Back to the Finance Committee report, Representative Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I ask for your support on the Finance Committee report.
Is there any further discussion on the Finance Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the Finance Committee report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The Finance Committee report is adopted. To the Local Government report, Representative Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What we did in the Local Government Committee is put in an amendment to make sure that there's fiscal accountability and put a cap at the amount of administrative costs that could go towards these two funds, which is at 3%. I ask for your support.
Thank you, Representative Duran. Is there any further discussion on the Local Government Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the Local Government Committee report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The Local Government Committee report is adopted. To the bill, Representative Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I ask for your support of this bill. We've had a long process with this bill already, going through appropriations, finance, and local government. And what's very interesting is that there was not one person who came to testify against this piece of legislation. We have a long list of stakeholders, including developers, business owners, Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce, in addition to a lot of advocacy groups. So advocacy groups for the homeless, for the disabled, that are all in support of this piece of legislation. I hope that you will support this legislation as well and join this huge group of stakeholders, including flood victims, that are supportive of the bill as it currently stands.
Thank you, Representative Duran. Representative Priola.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I move L012 and ask that it be displayed.
Thank you, Representative Priola. Amendment L012 has been moved and is a little fuzzy, but it's being properly displayed. To Amendment L012, Representative Priola.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And members, the sponsor of the bill just mentioned that this bill will help the disabled. So I want to codify and make sure in language here that 15% of any loans that come from this program, 15% of them build specifically to ADM compliant structures, living quarters, so on and so forth, as defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act. I think this is a good amendment. Please vote yes.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a couple of questions about this. First off, I'm not sure that it actually fits under the title. So I would like to start by having a ruling on whether it fits under the title.
Thank you, Representative Duran. We'll be in a brief recess to see if this fits under the title. The House will come back to order. The chair rules that Amendment L012 does not fit under the title of the bill. To the bill, Representative Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I ask for your support.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1017, Mr. Minority Leader Del Grosso?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, House Bill 1017 is an excellent example of unintended consequences and why we need to try to bring a bill to fix unintended consequences. Prior to 2007, affordable housing, which a lot of people can talk about, the most affordable housing out there would be multifamily units. And in construction, multifamily unit construction prior to 2007 was at 26% of inventory that was being built. 26%. But in 2007, there was some legislation that was passed, rammed through, partisan. It absolutely is to the bill because I'm explaining why your bill is necessary. Thank you. But prior to that, 26%. A construction defects law was passed in 2007, and now only a few years later, we are now down to, in 2013, 2%. 2%. So when you go from 26 to 2%, that is the root of the problem. And so now we're trying to pass 1017 to say there isn't a whole lot of affordable housing out there. And this is basically just kind of a Band-Aid on the problem and not going after the root cause of the problem. And the root cause of the problem is people aren't building these. and us dangling a few $1,000s in credits, because if you look at the overall fiscal note, $4 or $5 million a year, well, next year is $1.5 million, 2016-17, $4.5. In the grand scheme of things, per project, that isn't a whole lot of money. And a recent study showed that the belief in the development community that the probability of being sued is nearly 100% when building these things. So dangling a little credit that 1017 puts in front of those folks when looking at the possibility of being sued, that is not going to entice somebody. Insurance companies have estimated that it will cost 25 to 45% higher to build these here. Do you think when you're looking at the increase of costs of 25 to 45% that dangling a few credits in front of them is going to get them to actually start doing something that they're not currently doing? I mean, we can all say, geez, we got this bill here, we're throwing some money behind this program to try to entice these developers and investors to try to start doing something. But the reality is we are not addressing the core root of the problem. These people are not building these developments for a reason, and it is not because we're not offering enough money in credits. It's because they're scared to death to build these things because of the financial consequences. That is what needs to be addressed instead of trying to throw a few $1,000s at a developer to say, hey, I know you got a possibility of being sued, all of the lawsuits that are out there and the millions of dollars that you could potentially be setting yourself up to, but hey, here's a couple $1,000 in a credit and maybe that'll offset it and make you feel better about it. We are kidding ourselves to think if this bill is going to actually do anything to solve the problem. Yes, affordable housing is a problem. And we talked about floods and natural disasters. Representative Becker's area, my area, other areas that have been impacted by floods, we have seen that need for affordable housing, even greater now. But the reality is this bill is not going to solve that problem. We need to go after the core root of that problem. So that being said, I urge a no vote on 1017. And let's go after the core root of the problem that will actually get developers to actually start building these things instead of trying to do a feel-good bill that will do absolutely nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Minority Leader. Representative Tyler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to point out that this bill does a number of things. It provides tax credits. It provides the opportunity to build rental housing, which is low income, affordable housing. It offers the opportunity to do single-family affordable housing. Now, if construction defects was causing all the problems in the world, it does not cause problems for single-family or apartment building. So you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater on this deal, which is not a very good idea to do. If you look at the construction defects issue, there was a recent study, and I would guess, I could be wrong here, that the minority leader's recent study was done by the Denver Regional Council of Governments. That study, which was done at the behest of the number of the players who have been looking at this issue, came up with about 6 factors that make a difference, and one that perhaps we can have an impact on. Now, one of the things in that study was that 100% or nearly 100% of the owners of developers of multifamily housing are being sued. You know who they asked that question of? Lawyers that do that work. They did not talk to homeowners. They did not do any scientific start of that. They just went and asked, hey, developer, what do you think? And I've heard that number a lot of times, and when I've asked for proof, I have not gotten that proof. Not even close. There are a number of factors that are involved in this. There was a bill that passed in 2003 that said that developers got everything they wanted. There was a bill that passed in 2010 that did not get a single no vote out of this House or the Senate in any committee. And when I was talking to people after that passed, they said, you know what the insurance companies are going to do? because the home builders brought that bill to solve their problem, the insurance companies are going to raise their rates and leave town on a bill that was passed at the behest of homeowners. What we're doing here is saying we have a number of things we want to do. We want to do affordable housing for apartments. We want to do affordable housing for single family. We would love to be able to do affordable housing for multifamily, owner-occupied. I think that's a huge issue, and to say there's one cause when the Dr. Cog study says there's 5 or 6 causes, then that's completely inappropriate to kill this bill or to put this kind of restriction on this bill and say no and leave out affordable apartments, which are not being built right now. The only apartments that are being built are high-income apartments. The only homes that are being built are high-income homes, and this gives the opportunity for affordable housing across a whole spectrum. Let's not kill a good bill and make the perfect the enemy of the good.
Members, if we can keep our comments to the bill, this bill, Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And members, when we're talking about House Bill 1017, and Representative Tyler came up and said that we're not having a problem with construction and we're not having a problem with class action lawsuits, which actually relates very closely to this bill, because what this bill is saying is that it's broadening the amount of dollars that can be given to developers, and it's taking into account the private developers for creating projects. The honest truth of it is that I used to have liability insurance because I used to do construction, and I did a lot of single-family homes, and I've actually done multifamily homes. And I don't do it anymore because I lost my general liability insurance, as every small construction company in the state did that was doing multifamily home insurance, because I was insured by Zurich, and Zurich just said, you know what, it's too litigious. There are too many class action lawsuits. And it had to do with EFIS, and it had to do with all sorts of issues having to do with owner-occupied multifamily units. So, and it would be, I'm not quite sure where Representative Tyler got his information. I know he said it was out of the Dr. Cog study, but I would beg to differ that actually I've lived it, I've breathed it, and actually you can't build multifamily owner-occupied developments in Colorado because you can't get any insurance for it. As an architect, I can't even design multifamily owner-occupied buildings, because if I do, I'll lose my professional liability insurance. And if that's not an indication that those projects aren't happening, you tell me what is. It really is not happening. But I do have a question of the bill sponsor. On the bill, just in the summary on page 2, it says the bill deletes the enumeration of the entities entitled to borrow such monies and also eliminates the requirement that such loan monies may be used for development or redevelopment costs incurred prior to the occupancy of low or moderate income housing. If the bill sponsor could please explain why you eliminated the requirement that the loan monies be used for the development or redevelopment cost incurred prior to the occupancy of the low or moderate income housing. And members, the reason I'm asking this question is because when you take out a loan on your house or whatever, if you have work done on your house, say you take a second out to add an addition to the house or to improve your kitchen or whatever, part of the collateral of that loan is the work that's going to be done on that structure. So that's how you, in fact, secure the loan. So if something were to happen, say, and you were going to, you got halfway through the project, you got into financial trouble, whatever, there's value that's been built into that structure because the loan that you took out, those dollars were actually spent on the structure itself. So what I'm not understanding, and if the sponsor could please explain, why you're not making that tie between the project itself and the loan that's being given.
Thank you, Representative Giroux. Representative Priola.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, this is a problem for development here in the Front Range especially. And case in point, the next time you're out driving around town, going by the many new light rail stations that are popping up with fast tracks, do a little investigation at the kind of residential building that's being done around there. It's not condominiums that are for sale. It's apartments. And there's a reason for that. It's because there's a reduced threat of litigation from building those kinds of domiciles. The DRCOG report says that an additional $15,000 can be attributed to each multifamily unit since the passing of previous legislation. As happens down here, legislature creates the disease and then rushes in with the cure. Well, that's what 1017 is. Think, well, we'll spend we'll throw out 1.5 million here and a couple of requirements, and we'll solve the problem. Then they'll start building single-family housing around some of the light rail stations as well as new development. This isn't going to do anything. And there'll probably be a subsequent bill next year and the year after that and the year after that, all along never addressing the real substantive problem of what is going on. I ask for a no vote on 1017.
Thank you, Representative Priola. Representative Zabel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess I would like a little bit of enlightenment. Representative Duran, I just have a quick question that I'm just trying to figure out here. And maybe you can shed just a little bit of light on it for me. So, housing and all kinds of other commerce deals with the method of supply and demand. And right now, it seems like there's a demand, but no supply. So there's always reasons, Representative Duran, for the supply not being there. And I was wondering if you could tell me, why is there no supply? There used to be supply. We're running a bill to try to bring this back. And there used to be supply, but now the supply factor in that is gone. Representative Duran, could you please tell me why? It would really preface why you need to bring this bill. Why are these low-income homes not being built?
Are you finished, Representative Zabel? Representative Zabel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I'm not finished. I'm asking a question to Representative Duran. I don't think it's a hostile question, as she's sitting over there ignoring me, but what is the reason why these homes aren't being built? What is the reason you brought this? What is the problem with supply in Colorado?
Okay, Representative Dorr. Are you ceding your floor to Representative Zabel again? Representative Zabel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, there has to be a reason why every bill is brought here to this. What is the reason, Representative Duran? Obviously, you know. Are you just not wanting to answer, or is the reason something that we can't stomach? Is that it?
Representative Dorr. Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We as legislators, we speculate a lot. We do a lot of guesswork. End of the day, we don't know all the answers. We know that. But what we do have is the ability to make sure that we can get to a better point to where we get at least some level of accuracy in the answers. So I move L011 to the bill and ask that it be properly displayed.
Thank you, Representative Dorr. Amendment L011 has been moved and is properly displayed to the amendment. Representative Dorr.
Members, over the last 10-15 minutes, we've been hearing about construction defects and what the issues around that they have in this bill, and especially affordable housing. So I propose that we do a study. We can't get to the answer. Most of us don't have that ability or time, but let's do a study, and of that study, be done by July 1st, 2015, then given to the governor. I'm sure he cares about this issue, and the chambers, the respective committees in it, because they do care about this issue. So we can actually get to a point where we can have a discussion around construction defects, what the issue is within the state, particularly affordable housing, and how we can address those in a real and productive manner. I ask for a yes vote.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I object to this amendment because it does not fit under the title.
The committee will be in a brief recess. We will come back to order. The chair rules that Amendment L011 does not fit under the title of the bill. To the bill, Representative Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I ask for your support.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1017? Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I looked at this bill, I thought of the history of affordable housing as we've dealt with it in the General Assembly as it affects this bill. And as my colleagues have discussed, and I have been here through that period of time, several things by way of public policy. I'm not going to talk about those bills. I'm going to talk about the public policy. Several things of the public policy have impacted the availability and therefore the market for affordable housing. And you know, I think the words market and availability as we talk about this issue are interchangeable because if affordable housing is available, then there's a good market. If it's not available, there's a bad market. But the point being that a lot has been done. A lot has been done that has affected the availability of affordable housing. And as my colleague, the minority leader, says, this bill becomes a Band-Aid. Now, the easiest thing in the world might be to simply vote for this bill because it's a Band-Aid. But so often in this House, I assume over in the other House, the other chamber, they shouldn't call themselves a House, they're a chamber. we find ourselves coming back after several years of public policy that negatively impacts something because of good intentions. And then we say, oh my goodness, look what we've done to the availability, the quantity, the market of affordable housing. And that's why I have great problems with this bill. And Representative Duran, I appreciate your motivation, but I guess I would suggest in times past we would have been better to do other things. So those are my thoughts on this bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Gardner. Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I stated a few minutes ago being up here, we don't have all the answers. We don't know exactly what all the impacts are with regards to this money being used for affordable housing. And so I offer L013 and ask that it be properly displayed.
Thank you, Representative Dorr. Amendment L013 has been moved and is properly displayed.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Please discuss Amendment L013.
This amendment is a study because we need to figure out the answers so we can actually address this issue. And the study will be on the impact of construction defects, on measures to expand the availability of affordable housing, the Housing Investment Trust Fund, the Housing Development Grant Fund, and the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit. And upon completion shall be given to the governor, legislative committees that are appropriate so we can address this issue and in a way start actually having a discussion around construction defects and construction defects with regards to affordable housing. I ask for a yes vote.
Is there any further discussion on Amendment L013? Representative Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How much is this going to cost, Representative Dorr?
Representative Dorr, did you want to answer Representative Duran? I'm sorry. Representative Dorr?
Madam Chair, may I ask Representative Duran to repeat a question? I stepped off for a second and was caught in a conversation.
Representative Duran, please repeat the question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did ask how much this is actually going to cost and what the fiscal note will be associated with that. But instead of getting an answer to that, I'm just going to argue that this does not fit under the title.
The committee will be in a brief recess. Come back to order. The chair rules that Amendment L013 does not fit under the title. To House Bill 1017, Representative Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I ask for your support.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1017? Mr. Minority Leader Del Grosso.
Members, I think we can all see that there is a lack of desire to actually study what's wrong with the problem. And they actually know that this is not going to solve the problem, and unwilling to even look at a study to find out what the core root of the problem is. So that goes again to my objection on why I urge a no vote. Let's actually fix the core root of the problem. and not let's just do something here and vote to say we just did something even though it won't do anything. Urge a no vote.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd ask for an aye vote. I know we've had now 2 amendments, maybe a third, maybe not, trying to deal with an issue that actually is outside this building, outside this bill, definitely within this building, but outside this bill. And I don't want to talk about a topic that doesn't fit in, but we could have a huge conversation, and I just happen to bring my economics book with me, which I could read about supply. We heard about supply and demand and those issues and why certain things aren't being built. It is a big issue, but it's not at the heart of this bill. This bill is about how do we help people and expand affordable housing. It is a good bill. It is going to do a lot for the communities that we all live in to make sure that working families across this state have access to affordable housing. When we talk about economic security, this is key to economic security. You can't be secure unless you can afford a house, a roof over your head. This bill will help to move us in the right direction. While we're hearing a lot about another issue, and that will come up maybe another time in another bill, that's not this bill. So I'd ask for an aye vote on this bill that will help expand affordable housing.
Representative Mitch Bush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in strong support of this bill. In mountain resort communities, the lack of affordable housing for our workers, for our teachers, for our firefighters, for our sales clerks, for our retail clerks has been an issue since the early 1990s. The problem is that there simply aren't the units. This bill will help that. I would urge a yes vote. Thank you.
Mr. Minority Leader Del Grosso.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Mitch Bush, that's exactly the point. Nobody's arguing that these things don't exist. We're down to 2% of these things are being built now, and it's not because we're not throwing enough money behind a credit. That's what this bill does. Urge a no vote.
Representative Tyler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to talk about some of the things, the kind of projects that this bill would further and improve and increase. Projects that have been done in the past by the Department of Local Affairs that would be encouraged and receive additional funding from this bill. Weld County, Clockwind Apartments, La Plata County, Southwest Transitions, Mesa County, Little Book Cliff Renovation, Larimer County, retail ponds. There's a lot of projects out there. There's a whole spectrum of ways that we can help deal with the low-income housing issues. I will tell you that along the West Line in my district, we have a great example of a project that opened a month ago that's totally subscribed that would be benefited by this kind of tax credits and loans, and that's Lamar Station Crossing, which has affordable apartments, and it also has market rate apartments. That's an anchor for what we're going to see on West Rail, because there will be other developments coming along. 2% right now, guess what? The free market's pretty hot. They're building a lot of apartments. They're not building low-income apartments very often, but they're building a lot of apartments because that's what's driving the marketplace today. And if you want to do a study, by the way, the private sector just spent about $65,000 on a study looking at exactly this issue. And if you talk to Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, you'll find the same problems obtained for millennials not being able to buy homes in single family or in the marketplace for a number of reasons, one of which is student loan overhang. So there's a lot of different factors out there. This covers a lot of territory for low and affordable housing for what people are willing to move into in the marketplace today. I urge a strong aye vote for this bill. It'll do a great job for affordable housing across the state of Colorado.
Thank you, Representative Tyler. Representative Becker.
I ask for an aye vote on this bill as well. In Boulder, we are doing our first Housing First project. Housing First aims to house the most chronically homeless people in a community. By providing Housing First, we are saving money for our hospitals, we are saving money in our jails, who otherwise are serving the most chronically homeless. The only limitation we have in doing more Housing First projects is money available that this bill will provide. It'll provide the tax credits and the grants to do more Housing First projects that then will save communities that have chronically homeless populations, costs at their jails and at their hospitals. So this not only helps those who need it most, it also saves costs in other areas. So I ask for an aye vote.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it looks like the conversation is dying down a little bit about this, but I did want to respond to a couple of questions that were raised. Part of the reason why there's language that is being deleted from our current statutes, particularly on page 4, is to really make sure that we cut some of the red tape that currently exists when it comes to the development and redevelopment of affordable housing in the state. And so that's why you see those provisions are deleted. Regarding the demand for affordable housing in the state of Colorado, there is a huge demand. Housing has to do with so many different issues that affect Colorado communities. And the reason I really want to focus on some of the different groups that support this legislation is because I would never believe that I would know everything to know about affordable housing in the state of Colorado, but I do rely heavily on those individuals who work on building affordable housing each and every day. And so I'm going to just let you know all the statewide partners that are in support of this legislation. Boulder Housing Partners, the City of Fort Collins, the City of Loveland Housing Authority, the Colorado Housing Champions, Community Housing Development Association, Del Norte Neighborhood Development Corporation, Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce, Inglewood Development Company, Inglewood Housing Authority, Estes Park Housing Authority, Fort Collins Housing Authority, Grand Junction Housing Authority, Housing Authority of the City and County of Denver, Housing Authority of the City of Pueblo, Housing Authority for the Town of Yuma, Housing Colorado, Jefferson County Housing Authority, the La Junta Housing Corporation, Pinker Construction Company, Summit Housing Group, Southwest Development Group, and the list goes on and on and on. Those were just a couple of the different entities that are in support of this legislation, and we literally have that support statewide from essentially every community in the state of Colorado, both rural and urban. And so I ask you for your support. This is going to go a long way in terms of making sure that people have access to affordable housing. And just one last thing. This bill is not a do-nothing, good-feeling bill. What this bill is about is it bases a tax credit on a tax credit that I will mention was brought forward at the federal level during the Reagan administration to be able to build and redevelop more housing in the state of Colorado and nationally. And that is what this bill is based on. So I would ask for your support. It creates incredible public-private partnerships to make sure we're meeting the needs of all Coloradans, those that live in the rural and urban areas of the state. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1017? Seeing none, the question before the House is the adoption of House Bill 1017. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. House Bill 1017 is adopted. Madam Majority Leader. Representative Pabon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
You've heard the motion. Seeing no objection, the committee will rise and report.
The House will come back to order. Mr. Kohler, please read the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Speaker, Committee of the Whole begs leave to reporters under consideration of following attached bills being second reading thereof and makes the following recommendations thereon. House Bills 1017 amended, 1182 amended, 1206 amended, and 1256 passed on second reading in order of gross placed on the calendar for third and final passage. Senate Bill 83 passed on second reading in order revised and placed on the calendar for third and final passage.
Representative Primavera. You've heard the motion. There is an amendment at the desk. Mr. Kohler, please read the Dorr amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Representative Dorr moved to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole to reverse the action taken by the committee in not adopting the following Dorr Amendment L010 to House Bill 1017 to show that said amendment passed and that House Bill 1017 as amended passed.
Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment, we had a fairly long conversation on it, so I won't go back into it. But the purpose of it is let's have an opportunity not only to say we're going to prioritize money, but really prioritize money in this legislation so that 50% of this money is put aside to help flood victims, to help fire victims, to help victims in our state who are
Representative Dorr,
citizens. Oh,
could you please move the amendment?
Sorry. Mr. Speaker, I jumped the gun. Mr. Speaker, I move the Dorr Amendment to the Committee of the Whole report.
Representative Dorr, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now back to my comments. This is an amendment that would just say we as the state legislative body down here understand there are people who have been displaced in ways we have never seen in Colorado. And we're going to allocate monies for that so that they are made to be placed back in a place that it will never bring their life back to what it was, but a place to where we recognize as a state that we can make their life more manageable. That's what this does. If the monies are less than 50%, it gets rolled over. But at least we're saying something to these flood victims, something that we say we understand what went on and it's beyond what many of us can even think is fathomable. I ask for a yes vote.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do ask for a no vote, and here's why. There's already an amendment that was added to the legislation that gives a priority to flood victims. So number one, this is not necessary. Number two, it focuses on 50%. What if the amount is more than 50%? What if the amount is less than 50%? The way that this is drafted, it just says 50%. And so ultimately you're going to tie the hands of the state if there is needs that are much greater or needs that are much less. And that is why we put an amendment in there that says absolutely a number one concern, number one issue that we should have is prioritizing funding for those individuals who lost their home and for those flood victims. And so the bill currently does this. This amendment is not necessary, so I ask for your no vote on the amendment.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I knew you were going to do that. Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to calm your nervousness, members, about what if it's more than 50%. Representative Duran just answered that question of whether or not if it's more than 50%. Goes into a priority system. So if we spend 50% and it's more than that, then it goes into the system, and then there's a priority system, and then, as according to her, flood victims or those that have been impacted by a natural disaster would be first on the priority system as well. The reality is all of these things are submitted to some government department. They decide how this money is allocated, and it may or may not fit in the priority system. But this just guarantees that if there is disasters like we've seen the last few years, unfortunately, whether it's a fire, whether it's a flood, tornadoes, that we're actually going to put money behind that and not just pay lip service to those folks and say, geez, you know, you're going to get thrown into a queue and hopefully you'll rise to the top and hopefully there'll be money for you and hopefully your disaster reaches to a higher level than some of the need, you know, somewhere else in the state. This just simply says that we are actually going to put funds behind you and what has happened to you and your community. And so I urge an aye vote on this amendment.
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm going to ask for a no vote on this amendment. I know there was some discussion about whether or not this amendment was in order in the first place. It's absolutely in order, but the real heart of the issue here is making sure that we do the right thing for our flood victims and running a floor amendment without appropriate notice and appropriate heads up to the bill sponsor out of a situation that probably there are very few people in this room more than me that have been affected by this. My parents just moved into a place last month. Actually, not even last month, about 2 weeks ago. They were so affected by the floods, they did not have a permanent place to stay until 2 weeks ago. So looking at issues like this, we can't afford to move in this manner, move so quickly with these things. I haven't heard from the Boulder County Long-Term Flood Recovery Group. I haven't heard from the City of Boulder, the City of Longmont, the Town of Lyons, Larimer County, Weld County. None of them have come to me about this bill and said, this is what we need. We're worried that we're not going to get enough of what we need if this bill passes in its current form. We need an amendment. I haven't heard that from a single one of these recovery groups. So let's move thoughtfully. This bill was heard in 3 committees. This was heard on local government committee, where Representative Dorr sits. It was heard in Finance Committee, where Representative Del Grosso sits. There were plenty of opportunities to ferret this out, to really discuss the nuts and bolts of this, to do the right thing for flood and fire victims. And to move this way and in this manner is why I encourage a no vote, because we need to be thoughtful about this. It's going to go over to the Senate. There will be time to have those recovery groups testify in committee about the components of this bill, to bring people together, because that's what this has been about. It's been about bringing all sides of the table together, and running an amendment on the floor like this isn't the right thing to do for flood victims. With that, I encourage a no vote on the amendment.
Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I guess I'm kind of confused. Why do we even have second reading then? If there's a reason why we have second reading. We are sitting as a committee of the whole. We are a committee. This is a stop in the process along the way. 65 of us all get to sit in here and talk about amendments, offer amendments, and debate amendments. And to think that somehow it's not appropriate to bring an amendment on second reading? I mean, are we advocating that we get rid of second reading and committee of the whole and go right from committee to a third reading? I mean, to think that it's appalling to bring an amendment and discuss something that we have heard on our side, maybe you haven't heard it, but to think that this is somehow crazy and out of the normal legislative process is mind-boggling to me. The reality is, if we want to say that this bill is about helping those that have been impacted by natural disasters, do we want to put actual dollars behind what we're saying the bill is about? That is what this is about. And to think, well, we can't vote on an amendment because it was brought in second reading, maybe we're just going to not bring amendments on second reading again for the rest of the year if that's somehow inappropriate. But there again, do we want to put real dollars behind helping those that were impacted by natural disasters? I urge an aye vote.
Any further discussion? Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be brief. You know, this amendment has been talked about, but when it comes to why this amendment came around, yeah, I was on the committee of local government, and we've all been in committees where 13 of us or 14, 11, whatever it is, sit. And part of the committee process is you get ideas to make legislation better to bring to second reading, and that's what this is. I think there's an opportunity here to make this legislation better. There was priority put on in the Finance Committee. This is putting on the second reading amendment saying, yes, let's put this on and let's say not only are we going to have a priority, we're going to designate funds for that priority. It's part of the process. It's a beautiful process, sometimes frustrating, but we don't need to get rid of second readings in general. Let's have the process and go forward. I ask for a yes vote in the Cal.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I ask for a no vote. If you pass this amendment, there's going to be 2 conflicting provisions in the bill. One provision that we already have in the legislation that talks about there shall be a priority for those flood victims. And let's not forget, this isn't saying just, willy-nilly priority. This means that funds must be designated to flood victims first. So if you pass this, you're going to have 2 conflicting provisions. And Minority Leader Del Grosso said, well, if the need is beyond 50%, then Representative Duran's amendment that she already added will kick in. That's not necessarily clear. You're going to have 2 conflicting provisions in the bill if this passes. So I just want to say really quickly that the amendment that is already there already makes sure that flood victims are the first priority. And when it comes to this amendment, I have not had any flood victim come to me and say, we want this in the legislation. In fact, the legislation as is has the support of statewide entities, both entities from rural and urban areas of the state, and it truly is a statewide solution to so many of the issues that Colorado families face. So with that, I ask for a no vote. I trust the developers, I trust the business entities, I trust the flood victims, I trust the disabled community and the homeless community that are all in support of the bill without this amendment, and I hope you support it as well. So please vote no on this.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of the Dorr Amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representatives Pedersen. Close the machine. With 31 aye votes, 27 no votes, 7 excused, and 0 absent, the amendment is lost. Remember, amendments need 33 votes. There are no more amendments at the desk. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote on adoption of the report of the Committee of the Whole. Representatives Duran, Lee, May, and Hamner. Close the machine. With 58 aye votes, 0 no votes, 7 excused, and 0 absent, the report of the Committee of the Whole is adopted. Announcements and introductions. Seeing none. Okay, hurry up, members. Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I feel like I've been late everywhere I'm supposed to be today. House Education Committee members, we will be meeting in LSBA this afternoon at 1:30, so I will look forward to seeing you there.
Representative Kraft-Tharp.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, thank you. So we know that parental involvement has a direct impact on child outcomes in our schools. So today I want to welcome the Colorado PTA, my own PTA, and the PTA members from around the state. Thank you.
Representative Wyden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, we will not be meeting in LSBA. As you just heard, Education Committee will be meeting there today at 1:30, so we will be in the old Supreme Court chambers starting at 1:30. Thank you.
Any further announcements or introductions? Seeing none, Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House stand in adjournment till 1 p.m. this afternoon, at which point we will adjourn until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. And members, just as an aside to that, we will do our business very quickly tomorrow morning, and there are no committee meetings in the afternoon. So hopefully you'll be able to head to your caucuses soon.
Okay.
And that's the end of my motion, Mr.
Okay. Okay, the House will stand in recess. Seeing no objection, the House will stand in recess till 1 p.m. today.